Hello, Mr. Chris.
Hello.
Fausty Witches of them all. I'm wondering whether I shared this to any of the groups.
I don't know.
I'm going to have to have a little look. I'm sure I did, but I don't know. So what you're going to have to do is, whilst I push a bunch of buttons and stuff, is you talk a little bit about whether your grandmother initiated you into witchcraft by having sex with you when you were a virgin child, like a certain popular famous Wiccan.
What?
Yeah. Did you not know that?
No, I
thought that it was a witchcraft thing.
No, I'm not familiar with this. And no, my grandma wasn't a witch at all, actually.
But Chris, everyone's grandmother, anyone who's anyone in the witchcraft world, has a magically witchy grandmother, surely. No.
We've got a lot of psychics that commit suicide in my matrilineal line. So I don't know if they quite count as the same.
Did they commit suicide before you came along, or is this just like
not since my conception. I mean, a family history of psychosis and suicide. Probably because they know too much.
Right.
You know how these things work.
Indeed.
So more than
I'm trying to work out how to share this. I think I found it. So yes.
But no
one
sorry,
in your family.
my grandma didn't. No.
But we did name the episode "Grandmother's Cauldron."
Yes. Well, I don't think we were specifically talking about my grandmother. We were talking about the old lady cunning woman, I believe.
So the archetype.
The archetype of Grandma's Cauldron.
Right, okay. See, I'm thinking that really this show was all about you telling me and the listeners all of you and your grandmother's secret potion formulas.
Okay.
And, all of the good stuff. You mean to tell me that you haven't got no secret formulas passed from your grandmother to you?
Not from my grandmother, no.
No?
I've got a few good ones from the last time I was here 1,000 years or so ago. But I don't remember.
It don't have to be a modern grandmother. It can be a grandmother from thousands of years ago if you prefer. We just want some super cool potions formulas. Because my grandmother, she wasn't a witch, but she taught me the art of working with the spirits and potion making from a very young age. She taught me how to make quads, which is a quadruple shot of vodka with some lemonade. And then if there's no lemonade, then we go down to tonic water. And if there's no vodka, we just go to a high alcohol nail varnish remover.
Okay. Well, in those sorts of spirits, yes, that's my dad's side of the family, who are all publicans. So
they're strong with the spirits.
All strong with the spirits. So I was definitely baptized in that way, growing up. I know the spirits quite well, don't they? But no, not in a witchy way. I could still probably create any kind of cocktail that would blow your face off. I once made shots that actually burnt through the veneer on a table. I don't know if I ever told you that.
No, you didn't. That's some powerful witchcraft.
But yeah, they literally was so strong that it started to eat through the veneer on my table.
Can you remember what was in them?
There was a lot in it.
Basically everything.
And it was this horrid green colour. Like kind of the emblem of the Ghostbusters, whatever that ghosty slimy thing was called. I can't think. The poltergeist in it. Ectoplasm, that's what I was thinking of.
Ectoplasm.
It was that kind of luminous green colour.
Ectoplasm's what you get when a spirit orgasms, isn't it?
No, don't think so.
No? Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure it's not about orgasms, Liam. Not everything in life is about orgasms.
Well, I know not everything in life's about orgasms, but I mean, ectoplasm. What's ectoplasm then if it's not juices from the spirit world?
That is disgusting an image. We're on the right channel for lots of people to tell us. We're on the right channel, but somebody must know the technical term for ectoplasm.
Ectoplasm is the technical term. I was led to believe it is juices from the spirit world. Now, my brain interpreted that to plasm, gasm. So I'm thinking,
okay,
No,
I don't think it's about that, Liam.
Right, because I heard there's a certain haunted pub in Wales, and I forget which one it is, but there's a spirit of a lady there who used to be a brothel. She used to be a prostitute. And if you wake up in the morning, you wake up with sticky sheets on the bed. There's a lot of men that have gone the next day to the bar saying that they've stayed the night and they've woken up to sticky sheets and has said to the barmaid and the landlord and that, look, this is what happened, right? I was in bed minding my own business. There was a spirit of a woman who jumped on top of me, and then I was ectoplasmed. And that's why the bed sheets need changing. Now, Chris, are you saying that they've got technical
that sounds like an excuse?
It's not ectoplasm, or are you saying there's lying?
I think that these people should not be believed. And that's a really bad excuse. And why you would tell that to a receptionist is beyond me. Anyway, I don't see what that has to do with Grandma's cauldron.
But Chris, if it's not ectoplasm in those sheets, then what is it?
I'm not explaining something you know very well about. You probably
are you gatekeeping now? Is that why? Are you hiding all this secret occult knowledge of why this certain pub there's sticky sheets?
I can't believe you just done this to me. What are you doing? Okay, can we get back to magic now, please?
Okay. So, magic. Grandma's Cauldron is the name of this episode. It was supposed to be about Chris revealing all the secret potions and formularies that were left by his grandmother who died. He was a witch, but apparently his grandmother wasn't a witch. She was an alcoholic. So we can maybe go back to potion making from the classical period where you grew up many years ago, last couple of lives you had, classical period, and comparing, to start off with, potion making back then and potion making now.
Okay.
Because as I understand it now, when you make a potion, you get olive oil and you get food coloring, and then you're done.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if
it takes now.
From my perspective, way back when, we did have this thing called olive oil, right? But we didn't put food coloring in it. It was sacred enough as it was.
Yes.
Some people made a lot of money from olive oil. It was the nectar, not the nectar from that hotel with the crazy brothel prostitute ghost, a different kind of nectar. So I want you to compare and contrast from back when potion making to potion making that you see nowadays. Because there's a lot of technical terms I see nowadays. And there's a lot of things that you are and are not allowed to put on your potions when you sell them on the internet.
Okay.
Go on then. Make a start.
I actually have no idea what you want from me today. I was assuming that we would be talking about potion making. There is no reason why we can't talk about medieval, which might, Eye of Newton, Tongue of Bat, that sort of stuff.
Potion making from thousands of years ago, potion making today. Do you see a difference?
Only from a purist point of view. Because nowadays we think of it as a alternative to chemistry, and we try to think of it in that way. That is, it's kind of alchemical without all the effort of what used to go into alchemy. Now it's all about your tinctures and your flower essences, homeopathic stuff, where it doesn't actually have the So lots of people still now consider those sorts of things, whereas actually in the ancient world it wouldn't have been like that. You'd have had something a lot more simple. That was the magic of it, was the fact that it was rare or was hard to prepare. It wasn't necessarily, it might be, like you say, as simple as olive oil itself. Olives didn't grow in special greenhouses like we can nowadays. If your climate it wasn't hospitable to growing olives, then you would have had to get that as an import. The same if you were using any kind of gem or a herb in your work. It's going to be something that either grew naturally, locally, or that you had actually went to a special effort to get hold of it, rather than ask Jeff Bezos for him to have it delivered.
Because what I'm hearing here is it's like there's this certain phrase that I hear uttered a lot these days, right? Health and safety gone mad. Is that why we have the homeopathic method doing so well? Is it a health and safety thing? Because when one wants to go and purchase some flying ointments, one does not get what one used to get. And I'm not talking about the wagon wheel getting smaller and having to pay more money for it. I'm talking about it not even being a wagon wheel at this point. I'm talking about it being a picture of a wagon wheel on that little icing, where they print pictures on ice and then stick it on a shit muffin or a cake in Asda. I'm talking about it being a picture of a wagon wheel on icing paper and then it's put on a shitty cake. That's what I talk about. Like, it's almost the same, but it's not. It's like kidding that it is the same. So
yeah, that very colourful analogy is perfect, because it's going to be some kind of flower essence. If you're buying a tincture on the internet right now for something that is flying ointment with belladonna, it is not going to even be a tincture. It's going to be the equivalent of a flower essence, where it is either so minuscule a fraction of the actual original tincture, so the actual base that was created, that then you might have had one vial that's then a single drop or half a drop. I don't know quite how you get half a drop, but a minuscule amount. It's been watered down to the point that what you're buying is essentially a flower essence at best, or a homeopathic preparation where it's supposed to be made from mistletoe, but actually it's so far from the original. I keep going to say base, but that's not what it's called. What do you call what do the hoodoo lot call it? The kind of master preparation. Why is my brain not working then?
I know what you mean.
So essentially, where you've got
mother potion or the main potion,
something
you
like
basically
that,
take
mother
bits
something,
out,
isn't it?
don't you? So you do one
Yeah,
concoction, and then
yeah,
rather than drain it out and then put it into bottles and that, they just keep that one and they take a little bit at a time and then add more
yeah.
into it. Yeah, I don't know what
So
they
like
call it.
yeah, it is something to do with mother, isn't it? I think my brain isn't working today. So but essentially what you're talking about is, say, a big jar or vat that has got, the original cat bones for a lucky cat oil.
Because there are two cheapskates to go and get another black cat that they say,
Yeah,
oh, got a black cat. It's going to struggle to find another one. I know. I'll make all the soup and potion in this one thing, and then that the lucky bone they call it. They take a black cat, and they kill the black cat, or they take a pre-prepared black cat that someone ran over or something. But it got to be a black cat oil, and then you take it and you get rid of all the gunk, all of the gristle and that, till you've got the bones. And then you take the bones and you often they chuck in a bucket. Some people throw it in like a little stream or something. And then one of the bones is supposedly floats to the top, right? And then that is the lucky bone, the magical bone, all the luck of a black cat, right? Because black cats are lucky. Clearly, this one was because it got run over.
maybe it was its ninth life.
Lucky bone, you take it and then you put it in your black cat oil potion. Apparently, I know I did some research on it and that, and there are various differences and approaches and stuff like that. But yeah, apparently you need a black cat bone, the lucky bone, where you get it out of, and that's frowned upon these days. So some people put a picture of a cat in the black cat oil. Some people just use roadkill. And then because it's quite difficult to come by, what they'll do is they'll just do a master potion, just have the one black cat bone, but you can make as many potions as you want just using that ingredient. Yeah. But no, I don't know. That's not health and safety. That's more animal rights and that kind of thing in here. So that understandable. But
it's a bit of both, because at the end of the day, it's got to be safe enough for you to apply it to your skin or whatever you're doing it. So therefore, part of it is that. But the other part is a case of actually, hoodoo practitioners wanting to get as much bang for their buck as possible. So they only have to do it once. Also, if you dilute it down, you've got to keep going back for more because it's probably not powerful first time round. That's why they end up doing these 7-day rituals. Oh, but did I just speak out of turn?
You're shitting on the hoodoo people.
So it's fine. They'll come for me, I'm sure.
Probably. Will you notice, though? If they do come for you, Chris, will you notice?
Probably not.
Will you have to dust off some stuff on your spider's web?
Yeah, probably.
The dream catcher is getting a bit filled up. I might need to clean it, type thing. Because you can obviously upset them as well because you made your own, dream catcher / negative energy absorber that you didn't buy from a Native American, which will upset them. Cultural misappropriation is your middle name. Chris,
it is, totally.
Cultural misappropriation, Fausty Evans.
But yeah, I just Googled it while you were talking, and yes, it's called a mother tincture, is one of the phrases used. Yeah. So I think there is a factor of it in modern processes, so witches now that want to try and get back to the original and try to do something in a traditional method will go to the tincture route. Obviously it takes a long time in terms of processing in order to get the first one done properly. So in some ways you kind of think, well, maybe it's a work thing. It's far too much effort. But yeah, it really depends on what. But the point I was trying to make was it is that kind of, if you were to prepare this yourself, and obviously I'm not suggesting that you all need to go and kill cats, but because I quite like cats. But what I mean is, if you're wanting a specific tincture, then actually attempting to make that yourself is going to have a much better, more potent use. The difference is you're not necessarily going to be able to really trust, depending on how much your knowledge of pharmacology is, will depend on how good you are at watering something down like belladonna until it is safe enough for you to consume. In a lot of ways, the flower essence is a better option. But at the same time, I just don't understand why you wouldn't just work directly with the plant without feeling the need to constantly make tinctures. But that's just my personal feels about it. Rather than going and buying them, a single attempt at making a mother tincture of this that you could then just, take a drop or two to add to your spells, because that's all it would be required. The difference is, most of the original potions wouldn't even necessarily have been tinctures.
No, they wouldn't have been.
Alcohol wouldn't be wasted in such a way, for starters. You wouldn't make alcohol like vodka in that way, because that would be far too wasteful a process to get to the levels of proof that we talk about nowadays. When you talk about mead and other things like that, they weren't particularly high in the alcohol content. That is a very modern alchemy thing. So actually, you wouldn't have made tinctures in that same way. You're more likely to use, water from the river or a spring in order to actually make what's closer to a flower essence with the actual flower in. Kind of like, or when you were little and you made those little perfumes that a lot of young girls used to make, where you used to get rose petals and stuff them in a little glass bottle and fill it up with water and then start dabbing yourself on it. Rose water.
Yeah, Claire says that a mother culture is what they called it. Now, let's go on to a serious topic now. Because, I can ask you a non-serious topic if you want. I mean, I can ask you something that's relevant. Chris, where do you stand on corpse medicine? How's that?
Corpse medicine?
Yeah, medicine that involves using parts of the corpse. Very big in medieval times.
I much prefer candles made from corpses, personally.
Human fat. You can be able to buy that from the old executioner. Human body fat. Yeah. What about generally corpse medicine in general? Is that something that you utilize?
No, not really. But how I feel about dead people. So there's too much opportunity there to have to talk to them, and I can get somehow involved in them. So no, I don't use that because I don't particularly like.
Nothing like that. Bit of skull moss up the nostrils. Nothing like that. Just use your wild orange instead.
Bit of wild orange. That's all I need.
Wild orange essential oil will cure anything, Chris. I mean, they say rosemary is a substitute for anything, but for you, it's the wild orange from that company.
I do love the wild orange. I can make all sorts disappear with the wild orange.
That you can buy from the thothwitchcraft.com website at an overly inflated rate. So, going into serious business then. Potion making. What do we define as potion making? Because there's magical kind of words that people hear about. They hear of things like elixir, potion, that kind of thing. But that back in the day possibly would have been seen as a type of medicine is liquid, isn't it? So when we talk about potion making, are you only talking about liquid things from your perspective?
I generally do. I don't think, although I include anything that involves mixing. So I suppose if I was making an incense, I'd still consider that potion making, I guess, personally. But that's just because it's any action, the cauldron for me. And I don't mean I use an actual cauldron, but it's that anything that requires that stirring motion.
Yeah.
So to a certain extent, even making candles, I would consider to be kind of potion making, because the mixture is still occurring. But that's just my personal feels about it.
For me, it's always liquid. And I've just looked the definition up, and potion is a liquid filled with healing, magical, or poisonous properties. So they'd go by the definition of a liquid. The reason I ask is that I don't really use the term potion making all that much unless I'm running like a witchy craft magical oils class. And if I call it potion making, I get all the people that always wanted to live in the wonderful world of Harry Potter enroll on the class, and I'll sell more tickets to it by calling it potion making instead of magical oils. But realistically, it's just brewing, essentially, I suppose you'd call it. And the reason I don't use it is I personally break it down to the end product. So I care less about the process and I think more about the end product. So if I'm making a magical oil, I'll know there's got to be an oil because it's an oil that I'm making. If it's a powder, it'll be a powder. But I call it all witchcraft. The only distinction I normally make is calling something herbal medicine. And I'm wondering if the detour that I'm seeing now, a big detour that certainly does stand out for me in this century compared to back when, which is what I was kind of alluding to start with, was the science this way, magic this way. And back then it wasn't like that. It was all together. Everything was together to the point now we've kind of got magic, science, social science, psychology in that, which is still there, but it's like
medicine
still. Yeah. So I'm thinking like in terms of your practice, whether it would be working on yourself when it comes to medicine or working for a client, how would you go about taking a route for that? Would you automatically think, I'm only going to use a magical route because of this reason? I'm only going to use a medicinal route or a scientific route for this reason? Or do you still combine all of the things together?
I still use both. But like you keep saying, I'm old. So I still use both, but that's because I still see them as two sides of the same coin. So, you know, I struggle to separate them these days into, you know, that's that and this is the other. So yeah, it would really depend on the client more than anything as to how I explain it. That's probably where it would be different. Is, you know, if you've got a client who would struggle with the magic-y answer, I'll give the scientific one. And I suppose that's the difference, is, you know, depending on the client will depend on how you explain it, but my actual route for making it is the same regardless.
That's interesting. So if you had, because this is modern 21st century ethics as well coming into play now, do no harm, Hippocratic oath and all that stuff as well. If you had a Christian client or a Christian member of your family and they said, look, I'm not into this magic, you know, I think it's of the devil, but I know that there are certain Bible cures that involve herbs and plants and that sort of thing. I'm interested in that and what you can do for me with that. Are you telling me that you would say, sure, love, trust me, go away, do some magic, do some medicine, combine it all together and say, here you go, this is just what you asked for, and pretend? Or
No.
are you saying that you would change your approach? And would you be willing to actually help
my
a Christian?
approach would, the approach doesn't change, because the approach would be that, oh, okay, I know what you're referring to. I actually know a better way. And you would explain the fact that these are the items that you're referring to. The modern equivalent would be these. Here you go. And the reason for that is they'll be referring to something that is in a text that, you know, is actually modern to me. So when you talk linearly, so the original method of doing that would be my natural go-to. So all you're doing is modernizing it.
Because I'm just thinking in terms of where your loyalties lie. Because there's an idea within medicine, particularly with all the forms you fill out in hospital and stuff, you know, with you give your permission to be treated in certain ways. So there's DNRs, there's people that will refuse to have blood transfusions and stuff because of religious beliefs, there's this and that and the other. The medical profession nowadays has to a certain extent, pander to it. You know, it's not quite at the extent of going in there and saying, okay, all of these medical things at our disposal, but you're only allowed to go for this, this, and this because that's what they picked from the menu. It's not quite that, but some people would kind of make a joke that it is. But for you in your personal practice, do you go towards that route and saying, I will treat the patient or the client or whatever it is the way they want to be treated, or you'd get what I prescribe you?
It will come down to a quite frank discussion that says, do you want me to fix this, or do you want me to actually pander to what you're saying? Because if I was the consultant stood there, my answer would be, I am the professional. I have to take your consideration and I need your consent. You can go and find another consultant.
Right.
And at that point, you don't need to take, just because that person is stood there bleeding out, a doctor takes they don't take an oath, but they are legally obliged to help you and do what they can within the framework of what you're doing. I don't take such a restriction, and therefore, if my shit ain't good enough, go and find someone that can do it better. You know, it's one of those, if I liked the sound or the challenge of the method that they've actually wanted. So going back to the Christian who wants it to be done the Abrahamic way, I would, of course, offer them the better alternative. But at the same time, if that's what they want, and I feel I could be bothered to do it that way, I then would go ahead and do it that way. But it would be more out of a, you know, yeah, sure, we'll do it your way. You're still going to die, but here you go. Or, you know, that horrible thing is still going to happen to you. Here's my disclaimer. But yes, if that's the way you want me to prepare it and I can be bothered, then yes. Otherwise, it'd be, I don't do that. Bye. Here's my answer.
I've struggled with this a little bit, being a robot and thinking in binary ones and zeros, yes or no. So for me, it's a case of, you've come to me with this problem. This is the answer. I can explain to you how I've come to that conclusion, but this is the best answer. What do you mean you don't want to take that approach? You want to take a different approach that's not even half as good? To me, that makes me think, fuck off then. But I am learning more and more as to different training and stuff like that I do in different areas for Project Asclepius, which we can't talk about yet. I am finding that actually I'm starting to care less about the client, and I'm starting to instead say, this is the golden package, the ultimate package, the thing we should do. This isn't going to work as good, but it's better than the alternatives, and this is, you ain't really doing a huge amount here, but it's still an option. I see this in capitalism. I see this in where you pick the one that isn't the best, you pick the one you can afford, right? But when it comes to this kind of thing, it doesn't really matter, because with magic and with these approaches, you can normally pretty much make all of those things price the same. So it's really a case of the option the client wants. And I'm just interested from your perspective of, would you just say, here's the cure, or here's the treatment, or here's what we're going to do, and just not explain it? And so because you're aware that there might be a problem, it's kind of a little bit manipulative. Or would you say, this is my way or the highway? Or would you say, here you go, this is what you should be doing. If you're going to fucking ignore me, go down this, or this option. Because I'm finding a lot of medical professionals take that last one of, this is what we should do. Yeah. Don't want it. Well, these are your next best options. You're probably going to die.
You can go with instead. And to be fair, that's 9 times out of 10, if someone's come to me for something that specific, they're going to trust me to do my job. But I think on that kind of 10th person that has just come to me because someone suggested, but doesn't really totally follow what's going on, then it is kind of a case of, can I be the way that you want me to do it? And I'll say that to them. Like, I'm not saying any of this is confidential. It is well, that's not how I would deal with it. This is the method I would do. It's then a case of going, okay, well, the method you're talking about is fun. So sure, let's do it. I'm not giving my guarantee it will work because it's not my method. But yeah, sure, we can go down it. Or it will be a case of, no, it's not a fun method and it's not a method I would use. Here's some other people you can go to and they'll help you. So, particularly when it comes to the Christian one, it will be a case, normally it will be a case of, well, I heard this, but obviously no one in my church group would ever attempt it. So I've come to you. And then it's a case of, well, unless you trust that my method's going to work, go back to your church group. And actually, okay, well, if it's down there in writing for you to go and show to somebody, then you guys go and figure it out. Sometimes it's worth the experiment because it's fun. And actually go, well, I know it's not going to work, and I can tell you now it's not. But yes, this is how that works. There's the modern equivalents to those plants that I mentioned, or whatever, or that preparation. You can't really do that anymore because such and such doesn't exist. The closest you'll get is this, and kind of give the alternative. And obviously, if they get, want to go and achieve it themselves, then by all means. It's the same way when we do consultations, Liam. And you just kind of go, there are no restrictions. Ask us any question, we'll give you the answer. It might be, how to make the nuclear, it might tell you that it is possible to make the nuclear bomb magically, but it doesn't mean we're going to actually necessarily give you the full formula. We could explain how it works.
Well, we won't supply the uranium and the components and stuff, but I don't know. I'm inclined to give a schematic, or basically explain it so they can draw the schematic themselves, more than likely. Yeah. But
because actually the chances of them actually being capable of producing the end result, is neither here nor there. But intellectually, I'm happy to have the discussion. Because I don't feel that we should censor information in that way. Yes, occasionally we're accused of gatekeeping, but that's not out of trying to stop you doing something. That's out of you not understanding what I'm saying. So why would I waste my breath? Is the only type of gatekeeping we do is, okay, well, I lost you at Cone of Power. So therefore, if you can't understand that far...
Oh, you're mean.
You know, at that point, you kind of go, okay, well, you don't actually understand what I'm talking about now. So I'm going to stop. And when you get to the point where you're ready for the next bit, let me know and we'll have that conversation then. But that's because, you know, we're mortal here. So I've only got a limited amount of time here before, you know, I have to come and decide if I want another meat suit. And I don't want to waste that time.
So this is something, again, that I've noticed in my own practice. And that's, I'd only ever use potion making, enjoy magic with that, when I'm working with a physiological problem. So if it is medicine and I want to use magic with medicine, then I'd probably go to potion making for that a lot of the time, or herbal medicine essentially, and then, you know, supercharge it with some magic as well. I've never been one for potion making for exclusively magical reasons, though.
No.
But that is what you see in the witchcraft shops. That's what you see is the quintessential magical potion that you're not allowed, because it says on the label, don't drink it and don't apply it topically, so don't touch it at all. Just, you know, shove it, dump it on the floor and wash your floor with it, or put it in a spray and spray it around, or go and, I don't know, pour it on a picture of someone you don't like, that kind of thing. And to me, that's always seemed a bit kind of like it's a lot of aggro. But the more we've been doing little mini potions making classes, and the more we've been putting out a lot of content about teaching spell work particularly, all of the components of spell work are in potion making. If you're making a magical oil or something like that, it's all in there, and you can condense it in there. But taking someone that you've taught how to make magical oils and that, and then say you're not making an oil this time, and you're not making a powder, you're using all of these ingredients, random things, but you're going to do it in a different way. I find that it doesn't translate particularly well.
Sorry, I'm just percolating that one. No, I get what you mean. I do get what you mean. But I just, yeah, I'm not quite sure why it doesn't translate well. But the main reason I find that more people gravitate towards that is because in recent years, aromatherapy and all that kind of homeopathic stuff is culturally there. And therefore, I think that's why people go in that direction, is because, you know, people are culturally aware of it. So therefore, capitalism can make use of it. Whereas actually, let's face it, we're not going to advise somebody to make a tincture unless there's some benefit to it being in tincture form. Whereas I think actually a lot of people go and explore different avenues because they think either no one else is doing it or because everyone else is doing it. In which case, you know, which is why the market is completely flooded right now with different ways of candle making. Like, do you know what I mean? Like the entire market is flooded with candle makers. The same way it's completely flooded with people that make magical jewelry. There is no reason really for a company even like ours to branch into those fields because the market's saturated with options.
I would say,
other than making the odd specialist piece and offering it, say, well, actually, as far as I'm concerned, nothing's off the table for us. If somebody specifically asked for something, we'd find a way to make that happen for them. So, you know, if they wanted some magical amulet that was made in this particular way, we would achieve it. but it would be a bespoke item as opposed to having a regular range of silverware, because you can't compete with it, and people don't understand it because they literally go, oh, okay, well, I can get that from that seller at 50, at 50 pence. Why would I pay you £200 for the same thing? And it comes down to the fact that actually they don't, that is made as pretty jewelry, whereas what we're offering them is a magical item, but it's going to be a one-off piece that somebody wants from us, as opposed to being regular custom, because we're not magical jewelry makers. So,
yeah, in regards to branching out into that, I think, what you've basically clarified there, I'd probably be more inclined to agree with, because you kind of said we wouldn't branch into it because of the competition. But the difference is they're not making magical jewelry, they're making magical looking jewelry.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. If you get something that you make and you put power into it and then it works, and then all of a sudden people copy the image of it.
Yeah. But my point is, people, unfortunately, aren't clever enough to understand the difference. So, and in this world, unfortunately, people just want to buy what is the cheapest version. So, that if they can buy it somewhere else cheaper, they'll expect that is the value at which it can be made. What they don't consider is the difference between a genuine amulet and something that is pretty and looks like one. But also they don't care, because most people are purely just after the aesthetic. Sorry to break this to you, Liam. But actually it would just be a complete waste of our time. You could just buy in somebody else's pretty jewelry and sell it cheaper. Because for what, it's like, really, let's think. There should be thousands of people wanting to watch Fausty Witches, because the quality of information that they get, even in this one, where we do it in a light-hearted way, far outweighs what is actually out there elsewhere. But unfortunately, we are not, young 15-year-old looking blondes
with nice fingernails
that
look like
that have beautifully polished backgrounds, and actually all they're doing is telling you what's in Scott Cunningham. But at the end of the day, the value is not known because they don't practice at that level and don't want to, because all they mostly want is to be Insta witches and actually, have the look and be able to talk to their equally shallow friends about their latest addition to their crystal collection, because it's something to talk about. Whereas actually committing yourself to a life of practice and pushing boundaries is not for everybody. And I'm not saying it should be, but there is, when you think of the amount of people that watch some of these other YouTube channels and whatever, they're not actually really after real information. They're after distraction. They want the equivalent of a Netflix series, entertainment.
Right, we have a question from Helen. Can house plants be used in potions and spells the way garden plants can? Do they have spirits and energy attached to them the way garden plants do? If you're looking at animism, all things have a spirit, because a spirit is essentially the energetic component parts. There's the parts that you see, there's the parts that you can see under a microscope, there's the parts that you can't see, with physical eyes or computer equipment and the like, but things that are existing on an energetic basis. All things that exist have an energetic basis, therefore all things have a spirit part / soul. Whether those things are particularly sentient and can help you in the ways certain things can, that's something that's up to debate, and you'd have to investigate each thing that you plan on working with to discover whether it's any use or not. With regards to house plants and garden plants, well, they're both plants, so you're dealing with plants at that point, so it will depend on the plant. And yes, essentially, to cut a very long story short, house plants same as garden plants. We've talked a little bit about the spirits, using in potions and that. Anything you can add, Chris?
Yeah, it's just as simple as saying that it's a living thing. So therefore it breathes and therefore has some energy, a spark of life that keeps it alive. Yeah. So of course there is energy to take from there, because you can take energy from anything, living or dead. The question will be is how much energy it can give you. So the nice thing about a living plant is you continue to look after it. It will keep giving you energy. You have to just be aware of how much you take. You know, the same as if you took too much energy from a human being, it would fall down dead or get sick. The same will happen with a plant. It is a living thing. So if you are going to abuse the plant, particularly by taking so much energy from it, you're going to have to replace that in some way. So if you're taking too much, then you will start to see the effects of a plant getting sick. So at which point you're going to have to counteract that with, you know, whatever your latest version of fertilizer is or whatever it is to make it healthy again, or stop taking so much energy. The question is whether or not, like Liam says, you take it from an animistic point of view, in which case you are not necessarily pulling from that plant, but by working with it as an ally, you are able to pull from all of that type of plant. Because obviously that's the basis of animism, is there is a connection between all rosemary trees, in which case there is an infinite amount of energy for you to pull from. In which case, you know, if you're pulling from that with permission from the plant spirit, then you are able to pull from all rosemary plants from just having the dead leaf of one. So what you can actually do from a living tree has you know, exponentially more potential. But essentially, exactly in short, what Liam said is that plant equals living thing equals energy to play with. So yes, wouldn't matter which.
And from a magical and herbal medicine perspective, and then taking the two separately, you'll be thinking herbal medicine, scientific approach. You're using the science, you're using the chemistry, the chemical constituents of the plant in there. So to give an example, that over there, here we go, in this skull, if you can see that, no, it's not cannabis. This is actually ivy, okay? English ivy. English ivy is used, well, the Greeks used it for inflammation, pain relief. What else did they use it for? Treating warts, I think, as well. Nowadays, it's often used to make children's cough medicine, the actual leaves. And there was a study being done to see, because it was showing promising signs that it could actually help with recovering from COVID. So there was a lot of research being done by that. Now, if you're thinking logically about using that plant, is an indoor plant. So the indoor plant, I control the environment. Like when we talk about going foraging, Chris, don't we, for plants and stuff like that, that you're using in cooking or using for herbal medicine. If a dog can cock its leg, harvest from higher, I think is your saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
I.e., the environment that you're taking the plant from, in a mundane way, are you going to want to be making medicine out of that plant if it's growing next to a motorway or next to a load of cars and stuff like that? Is it in great condition? Some plants growing in the house absorb your energy from a magical perspective, but from a mundane perspective, you're in control of the growing environment. This might need to be dusted every now and then, but it's pretty safe. If this was coming from somewhere randomly in the forest, it could come with various other attachments, both magically and not so magically. Thinking about what you're using, because again, this is something that's controversial that we've spoken about numerous times. Taking something that works for something, or is a cure for something, or a treatment for something medicinally, and then making it do the opposite. So, for example, ivy is used to treat bronchitis, right? But what if you wanted to give someone bronchitis magically? You could potentially get ivy to help you do that. But from my perspective, logically speaking, you could get any ivy as long as you could work with it from a magical perspective and you have the ability to do that. But I would pick the nasty ivy that's wilting in a shitty place for a shitty use. I use the nice ivy for the medicinal stuff, and I use the shitty stuff that grows in the hedgerow along the side of the road that gets splashed with mud all the time in the winter and gets all the car fumes all over it in the summer. I use that for the nastier stuff. Now, could you just give me any old ivy and me be able to use that magically? Yes, probably. But from my personal work, I do find that ivy next to the road that's growing in a nasty environment is in a bad mood, and if it's in a bad mood, is more likely to be grouchy and want to fuck with someone. Is the equivalent of literally saying that if you're talking about the personality of the plants and the spirits of the plants and that kind of thing, just thinking about it logically. Don't get too het up on what other magical practitioners and particularly books say you have to do. Definitely do your own experimentation. And I think if you just think logically about it, you'll find that it does kind of make sense. Because I started doing that. I didn't necessarily go out particularly to work with hedgerow on the side of the road, but there was certain things that were there, and I did one day think I'm going to compare this to that that's growing in a technically like a little nature reserve, and there was a difference. And it made me think that is pretty shitty. I'm going to use that for shitty stuff. It's just kind of logic. So when you think, Helen, about using houseplants for potions and that, think about why you're asking the question. Try and think logically about it. Experiment and then see what results you get. And then after you've done all that, you could potentially go and do some research and see what other people are saying. Because it's really interesting for you to do your experiments and then see what other people put, because they'll often find the same thing. And I think, Chris, this gets missed a lot, where people say, like even the beginner stuff, really super simple stuff, we always still get people to not research it, to go and do it first, even though you can find loads of research about it online and experiences from other people, because it gets you in the right mindset of experiment and working things out for yourself. Because eventually when you go down the rabbit hole, there are a few people there. So there's few people to ask. So you getting used to at the very beginning experimenting on simple things means that when you are one day working on big projects, that you don't have anyone to ask help from because there's no one else on that road, that you're already used to doing that. But yeah, I don't know. What's your thoughts on
at the end of the day? It depends on the work that you're doing, as far as I'm concerned. So, you know, if you're wanting to naturally grow something, any kind of spell, whether or not that's an attraction spell that you want something to grow, you want a new job to come, or you want to grow your financial situation, All of those things, using a living plant that, like Liam says, you can control its environment. So a plant that might necessarily be a garden plant, but that you're keeping indoors, allows you that opportunity. You know, if you're not particularly green thumbed, and we've, you know, got clients that, you know, aren't particularly great at growing things, it's not something everyone can do. But at the end of the day, if you can find, if the spell is about growing, grow something that you can grow. So if that means you going and digging up a dandelion from your garden that you know will survive anywhere, regardless of how it's connected in terms of reference, the fact is that thing will grow anywhere. So, you know, growing a weed because you're not very good at growing things, one, is tricky to explain to friends if you're not out in, you know, out of the broom closet. But literally, if it's a case of you need something to grow, and the best representation you can get of that is to grow a weed, then do it. At the end of the day, like Liam said, the biggest difference about a houseplant is exactly that you can control its environment. It means that it's not going to die off in the winter if you change it. You know, I particularly love growing orchids. The bit I like about those is the surprise of when they bloom, and for me, how frequently they bloom. Most people wouldn't grow something as complicated as an orchid because most people can't understand how well it grows and what you need to do to make it grow, and therefore they die on them all the time. If you're not someone that's particularly good with plants, why would you attach a spell to something as complicated as an orchid? You know, it's still a house plant, and there is no medicinal uses to the types of orchids that I grow, but they have some beautiful representation, and the fact that it's a hard skill means that when I add something from one of my orchids that have lived way longer than they're supposed to, as forced to grow shop bought orchids, shouldn't last longer than 3 years. And when you've got one that's lasted 20 and you're thinking, okay, well, I've managed to maintain that has some very potent magic there of the fact that you have managed to get that is going to be better than any special mint or whatever you bought in order to make that work. It's about that relationship, and not just from an animistic point of view, but that you have put the energy in there. It has your energy in it because it's around you, it's in your environment, and you have controlled the way in which it has grown. So, you know, there are things that you could do with that plant that you might not be able to do with a plant that you grew in the garden for the first time.
Yeah.
And particularly some of these plants that are on these lists by Scott Cunningham and others are plants that you are hard to find or difficult to grow. In which case, why would you be focusing on that when if you could find something else on the list that's a lot easier to grow, and therefore have more chance of successful practice by using them. So I don't know if I've gone off on a tangent or if that actually answered the question. I don't know. But
it's a slight tangent, but I'll expand on it because we're talking plants now, and I want to talk a little bit about magic because Helen's brought up houseplants. I have a bonsai tree because I quite like bonsai trees. It's the one bonsai tree that I've got left that I am giveaway or purposefully killed or various other things. It's the oldest bonsai tree I've had. And it's actually our family tree. So that is a spell that actually links to the family. And I have trained that tree to now, well, for example, when my slutty cousin got knocked up, a little sprout started to grow in on the certain branch that belongs to that part of the family. I decided whether to snip off that. I also decide which branches grow and which ones get bound and the like. And when someone pops their clogs, I break that little bit of that branch off and I let it drop on the ground, and then that ground breaks down, and then you have not just on top of the ground where all the living people are, the living representations, but also the dead as the soil. And we do talk a lot about graveyard dirt, dirt and that. If I'm working with my specific family members and I just want to work with them, I won't bother going for the graveyard dirt or the Saturnian dirt. I'll just take a little bit from that tree because it's started to build up that charge. And really, the ancestral altar that we talk about, because we, have big ancestral altar of the dead that we take around when we do events and stuff. We don't normally put our ones on permanently or anything like that, anything related to us. It's more of a combination of whoever's at that event builds it. But I don't really have an ancestral altar at home, but I do have this little tree, this little bonsai in a pot, and that is essentially my ancestral altar. And there are things also buried in the dirt and that, but I shan't talk about those. The one thing I would end on, though, because we talked a little bit about potion making, a little bit about herbal medicine, a little bit about that sort of thing, is that when you look at old spells, medieval spells, ones before that, for a long time they were kind of poo-pooed as, oh, that's mumbo jumbo, that's magic, that's nothing, old silly people, what they used to believe. But more and more research is now being done with these, and what sounds like really strange ingredients, some of them are strange because they were slang terms for things. So like you were saying, eye of bat, wing of bat, eye of newt, all that sort of thing, were slang terms for plants that looked like the thing. But then there are other things which they are actually the thing. So there's a lot of research being done. And unfortunately, herbal medicine is one of those things that Big Pharma doesn't tend to go into because there's no money to be made from it.
No.
Botany, everyone that pushes botany normally as a science are quite a lot of the time amateurs. All the discoveries that are made often are amateurs. It's not someone in a university somewhere. It's actually people going out and working with the plants and then reporting it. There was recently a discovery about, I think it's onion, garlic, and cow's stomach as an Anglo-Saxon cure, which now is starting to be developed to kill off MRSA, superbug, where they were struggling, and now all of a sudden some Anglo-Saxon thing that's been around for hundreds of years as a, they wouldn't have necessarily called it a killer of bacteria or anything like that, or viruses or anything like that, because they didn't really think about it that then. It would have been listed as a cure-all or something to banish spirits and that, and it would... There's so much stuff, things like penicillin and all that. It's been around for thousands of years. It's not new. It's just that we start adding and learning about chemical constituents of plants and having long names for things and then start. It. But yeah, I mean, you could do worse than to take potions and things that have been written down or inscribed on temple walls and that, and really experiment with them. I'm not advocating taking a load of stuff because that can go horribly wrong. But think of it in terms of you don't really know what it is. You don't know whether it works, you don't know what, and try and reverse engineer it. The students I find progress really quickly are ones that like to and make a habit of reverse engineering spells, because you're taking something that is there that you don't know whether it works or not. It's easy to reverse engineer a spell that worked, but taking something that is from the classical period, for example, and saying, look, I don't know whether this worked or it's just superstition. I don't even know if the ingredients in this are the ingredients I think they are, because it's a different translation. But taking the general formula, the idea, we see a lot of this with Kaifi or Kefi incense.
I was just going to say Kefi
is a really good example of that, because very often people that embark on that kind of journey, they might be trying to recreate Kaifi, whatever, but they end up learning so much about the process that they end up having something that's unique to them, some piece of knowledge, something that they've actually put a lot of effort into, that often will work better. I mean, that's one of the things that I like to introduce the beginners to is that kind of Four of Thieves vinegar. It's a brilliant potion.
Yeah, it's another great
it's
one.
It's not what you're putting in it that makes that a great potion. It, will depend on whether it works or not. But the way it's taught is through a story, the story of the Four Thieves, the story of you need different parts of that potion that are all designed to do a specific thing. Thieves, you get the getaway driver, you've got the, the muscle, you've got the intelligent, but you've got all of these things. Like when we formulate essential oil recipes. I mean, the athlete's foot one's obviously a popular one where you think, okay, it's normally, okay, I need something that actually does the work, something that actually gets rid of it, use the tea tree. And then I need something that's a bit more calm, a bit more soothing. Good cop, bad cop, lavender. And then you could think, wait a minute, this bad cop normally works, but this bad cop ain't bad enough. So what do I then replace the bad cop with? I'll replace him with clove. But clove's an asshole. So I don't use clove for very long. I use clove for a certain amount of time, and then I switch to tea tree. All these kind of things. The story actually tells you more about how to build the potion than you memorizing all of these different uses in that, because it formulates based on, I've got characters in a story. Each character has one job, and there are only 4 of them. All I need to do is pick one herb, plant, whatever component part,
which is what confuses people when you look at some of these stories. Eye of Newt might be obvious because it looks that way, but often actually the story is in the adder's tongue. It doesn't look like an adder's tongue at all. Actually, what is special about an adder's tongue? Why would you call it that? At which point you're thinking, oh shit, it's about to smell me before it bites the shit out of me. Like, is the kind of going, okay, now you're dealing with an allegory, and the allegory is there to tell you how to use it, not necessarily what it looks like. And that's why you'll have, 20 different names for the same bloody plant. And often the same name for several different plants, because in different places it's called the same, it's called something different. And therefore in another place they've used that phrase for something else. Which is why it's such an for people that want a test. Like you say, Kefri is a perfect example of testing your kind of potion making skills. And like I say, that's where I would again use the word potion making, even though it's not a liquid. Is it's the cauldron aspect. It is the mixing of ingredients in order to create a finished item that keeps the phrase for me. But yeah, there is so much to be learned about it. And at the end of the day, like any modern medicine, it's not going to react the same with everybody because all our bodies are different. And on top of that, our lifestyles are so different and our diets are so different, which means the same organ in, different people is still going to have slight differences to your tolerances, etc., etc. And the same is of the plant world. The main reason we synthesize, other than to make money, is to try and remove the things that will react with your body. If it's synthetic, it's more likely to do the good job and not the bad job, because you've isolated a particular constituent. But which you can't do with a plant version. You could have 30 different opium plants. They're all going to have slightly different potencies. Obviously, it's different when you're working it from a magical point of view, but we're talking about we're talking about herbal medicine. There's still too much fluctuation for you to necessarily know the exact It's not the same as saying, okay, take these 3 synthetic pills that are identical because they've been made identically.
You pay a price for that, though.
Of course. I'm not saying it's better in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is that's the reason we do it that way, is both for financial reasons and for legal reasons. You can say that is the same every time. We're not saying that's good for you. But you can say, I bought this label that said this. You know it's got this in it. Whereas, otherwise it's an educated guess or testing every batch from a plant version.
Yeah.
It's always been able to test and maintain that.
It's always been a problem with herbal medicine, is that depending on the plant is going to depend on the chemical constituents that are there, and then taking those out of the plant or utilizing that plant for medicine. There are many ways that you can use, like the tincture method of extracting a maximum amount, so you know that you will get that amount in the alcohol. And there are ways around that you can do it, like using that, which is a more modern approach, which really does work really well when managing dosages and stuff. But it still reacts differently. It's still a bit of a pain in the ass compared to creating pills. But the problem with the pills, of course, is that you are isolating that. So with bacterial antibacterial resistance, you're talking about taking something and making it so simple that it does work, but then bacteria, viruses adapt really quickly to that. Whereas when you do have the whole plant, there's so much going on, it's difficult for it to combat it, just because the sheer amount of stuff. And then also the one thing that you don't really, the difficult thing I think with learning the herbal medicine when you get past the basic stage, is that you can get plant A and that does something. You can get plant B and that does something. And they both do the same thing. But when you combine them together, it's like 1,000 times more effective. Because you can understand it being doubly effective, but just the combination of those together is so much more effective. But at the same time, you can also get the opposite effect if you are taking plant A and plant B that are supposed to do the same thing, but if you marry them together, it has the opposite. It is one of those things, but we're way over our time.
We are way over. But the only thing I want to say to that is the obviously going back to the tincture part. Yes, there is a maximum saturation rate, but that means that sometimes you're wasting a shitload of that ingredient because there is a maximum. So you won't know that there is more to be used than you've actually used. So you know that actually this amount will guarantee I'll hit the maximum. But actually that might have actually done 3 lots of that. But you don't know, because you just know that the maximum, the way to guarantee the maximum is to put this amount in, and there's so much wastage there. And that's a bit that I can see the point of synthesizing, is because you're wasting a lot of a resource for essentially no reason, other than trying to keep your dosage the same. But it's like anything, you don't necessarily need the same dosage every day, which is the other part that people forget. You take a tablet every day, or a herbal remedy every day, you get into the habit of taking it every day. There are days that you don't need that, and actually you could do with the break from taking it every day to allow your body to stay working, instead of being told, oh, he's going to put it in my body, so I don't need to produce that anymore, and therefore you can't stop taking the tablet. But anyway, we've way gone over, but hopefully it ticked all the boxes of potion making. It's such a subject. It's such a huge subject, and to try and condense that even to an hour is one of those. So hopefully this was So
we talked about herbal medicine and stuff like that. I think in the Witchcraft Live group, that we did a whole, I think it was like an hour, where we just talked about approaches, taking magical approaches to healing, and a little bit about herbal medicine and stuff, and some of the stuff that can potentially go wrong, some of the things that you really got to put some thought into, and that. One thing I'd probably say that the two kind of marry up quite well is the idea of taking the minimum dose that is effective to treat the condition. And with magic, that should also be the case. It's a sign of a good witch, the one that doesn't overpower spells. They use the right amount of energy in order to make happen what they want to happen, because bad things can happen with high doses, and bad things can happen by supplying too much energy into something. So,
well, that energy's got to go somewhere.
Yes, exactly. And there is such a thing as a spell that's too effective.
Yeah.
But there we go. I will play us out with the Fausty Witches theme tune, and we will be here next week talking about some other stuff. What? I have no idea, but
it'll be good
all I know
no matter what.
It will be absolutely brilliant. Obviously, if you haven't already joined the Thoth Witchcraft Patreon for all of the top secret goodie stuff behind the scenes from all of the various different things we do. And goodbye. And Lucy says, thank you very much. Very informative. Great show. Good night. So, goodbye, everyone.